This is Laowa's latest ultra-wide-angle lens specially designed for DSLR cameras. It is super compact and it has a special feature which makes shooting landscape photos a lot easier. Kia ora, good morning everyone, Richard here, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to have a look at this latest ultra wide angle lens from Laowa. It is the 40mm f4 Zero-D DSLR lens. It's been a while since I last used my DSLR camera to do a review. So let's talk about how this lens performance is like and whether you should add it to your camera bag or not. Unlike most other Laowa lenses that I've reviewed recently, which are designed for mirrorless cameras, this 40mm f4 Zero-D DSLR lens is a full-frame lens that is specially designed for DSLR cameras. It is available in Canon EF and also Nikon F mount. Of course, you can use it on your Canon or Nikon mirrorless camera using an adapter, but if you only have a mirrorless camera, then you should just check out the Laowa 40mm f4 Zero-D mirrorless version, which has a completely different optics formula, and that lens is optimized for mirrorless cameras. This 40mm lens has a 115-degree field of view when used on a full-frame camera, and Laowa classified it as one of their Zero-D lens, which means this lens has zero distortion. And we'll have a look at the distortion later on when we look at the image quality. It is a very tiny lens, especially considering its 14mm ultra wide angle focal length, and despite the metal construction, it is also very lightweight as well. The Canon EF version is only 320 grams and the Nikon F version is only 360 grams. The Canon version is shifted, so you can control the aperture from the camera body, and it supports auto aperture and it would also record all the metadata in the EXIF data. The Nikon version is what I use in this review. It has the exact same optical formula, but the Nikon version is not shifted. However, it supports the aperture coupling feature, which means the aperture remains wide open even if you stop down the lens using the aperture ring on the lens, and it will only stop down when you take the photo or when you trigger the depth of field preview feature. It means the optical viewfinder would remain bright and easy to see even if you want to take a photo with a smaller aperture setting. The lens has a 67mm front filter thread, so you can use the normal 67mm filter with this lens. The focus ring is at the front and it has a 90-degree focus throw. The focus ring is very smooth and very well dampened, as you would expect from a Laowa lens. One usual problem when you are shooting with a many focus lenses, especially when you are taking landscape photo, if you rotate the focus ring all the way to the infinity side, you can actually move the focus past infinity. And if you try to use the focusing scale on the lens to set it to infinity, the focusing scale usually are not very accurate as well. But with this 40mm Laowa lens, you could calibrate the infinity mark on the lens yourself. Just to be clear, it is not for you to adjust the hard stop at the infinity side, but you can align the infinity mark on the focusing scale with the actual infinity focus setting on the lens. The calibration process is very easy. First, you just need to loosen up the ring at the front of the lens. Then you just need to adjust the focus ring so that it is focused at infinity, and now you can adjust the focusing scale so the infinity mark is aligned properly. Then you just need to tighten up the ring at the front, and that's it. And once you've done that, you can set the focus to infinity very easily by just using the infinity mark on the focusing scale. So this makes shooting landscape photo just a lot easier. If you are shooting with the Nikon version, there is the aperture ring at the back of the lens and it has clicks. There is one click per stop from the maximum aperture f4 all the way to the minimum aperture f22. One very cool thing about this 14mm Laowa lens is it has a very short minimum focus distance, which is only 14.5 cm, and that will give you the maximum magnification ratio of 0.3 times. So it allows you to take some very close-up, almost semi-macro photo with a very wide field of view. So the photo will look quite different to the typical macro lenses which has a 60mm or longer focal length. But there's one thing you need to be aware of is when you're shooting at the minimum focus distance, there's only about 2 cm or so distance between the front element and your subject. So you have to be really careful with the lighting to not cast any shadow on your subject. But a good thing about this lens is it is an internal focus lens, so the front element doesn't extend when you are adjusting the focus. So you don't have to worry about the front element will suddenly touch your subject when the camera is on the tripod and you are adjusting the focus. Okay, now let's have a look at the image sharpness. I did the image sharpness test on my Nikon Z6 using the FTZ adapter, as it has higher resolution than my 16 megapixel Nikon DSLR. At the maximum aperture f4, the center sharpness is already excellent. Very good details, very good contrast, and I see no sign of chromatic aberration as well. So even when I stop down the lens, I can't really see any improvement or difference in terms of the center image quality. And now let's have a look at the corner. At f4, the corner sharpness is quite good already. And at f5.6, the sharpness becomes excellent. So if I stop down the lens further, there is not much difference in terms of corner sharpness. At the maximum aperture f4, vignetting is really noticeable. At f5.6, it is a little bit better, but vignetting is still quite noticeable. At f8, vignetting becomes a lot better, but the lens seems to always have a little bit of vignetting even if you stop down further. This Laowa lens has quite decent chromatic aberration control. Yes, I could see some hints of color fringing in some of the very high contrast photos, but the amount of color fringing is very minimal and doesn't really bother me too much even when I'm shooting at the maximum aperture. As I've mentioned at the beginning of this video, Laowa called this 14mm f4 lens a Zero-D lens. So not surprisingly, this lens has excellent distortion control. Looking at all my photos I took in real life and some of my test photos, I see almost no barrel or pincushion distortion at all. So this lens will be a great choice if you want to take some architectural photos. Lens flare control is quite good with this Laowa lens. While you could still see a little bit of lens flare and ghosting when shooting into the sun, the amount is at a very minimal level. I did a portrait photo shoot a couple of days ago and it was a bright sunny day and I shot a lot of photos with the sun in front of the camera, so they're all backlit photos. I noticed that the photos from the Laowa lens is usually the one that give me the best color and contrast straight out of the camera. This 14mm Laowa lens has a 5 braid aperture design, just like all the other recent wide-angle Laowa lenses, and that will give you the signature Laowa 10-point Sunstars. At f5.6, you can already see some beautiful sunstars in the photo, and as you further stop down the lens, the sunstars become sharper and sharper, and at f22, you get some very clean and nice looking 10-point sunstars. So if you love sunstars, especially if you love 10-point sunstars, you would definitely love this Laowa lens. Usually for ultra wide angle lenses, I wouldn't talk too much about the bokeh, but since this Laowa lens can focus really close, you can still dissolve the background when you are taking close-up photos at maximum aperture. When shooting at f4, bokeh is quite round, but I can see a bit of highlight at the edge of the bokeh. Once you stop down the lens to f5.6, bokeh already turned into pentagon shape because of the straight 5 braid aperture design, which is obviously optimized more for sunstars instead of bokeh. And as you further stop down the lens, bokeh would remain in the pentagon shape. With mirrorless cameras becoming more and more popular, new lenses that were released over the last few years were mostly specially designed for mirrorless cameras. So it's great to see Laowa is still creating some brand new lenses, especially for photographers who like to stick with DSLR cameras. The best thing about this new Laowa lens is its very compact size for such a ultra wide angle lens. This is something Laowa seems to always really focus on. They always try to create lenses that is very compact so that you can take it with you instead of leaving it at home. Image quality of this lens is also very good. Great sharpness, virtually no distortion, very minimal amount of chromatic aberration and lens flare, and it can also render those beautiful 10-point Sunstars as well. The only downside is vignetting, which is still noticeable even I stop down the lens to f8 or even smaller. Vignetting is usually the weakness of the ultra wide angle Laowa lenses, probably because of their very compact design. Fortunately, this is one thing that can be easily fixed in post-processing. Another thing I really like about this lens is the ability to calibrate the focusing scale on the lens, and the process of the calibration is also very easy. Now ideally, I would love to be able to calibrate the hard stop of the focus ring so I can just turn all the way and that will give me infinity focus setting. But the ability to calibrate the focusing scale is already a big advantage compared to most other manual focus lenses in the market, where the infinity mark is never really accurate at all. If you have any question about this lens, please feel free to just drop a comment below. Thank you very much for watching this video.